Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the focus of today's debate lies in the nature of representation. And in order to win the debate, both sides of the House need to show how their standings in the debate best advocate for the most justified form of representation. And in this regard, side proposition's burden of proof is to prove to you that the status quo achieves this justified representation. And by way of a case split, ladies and gentlemen, I, as the first speaker, will be dealing with two arguments. First of all, the best possible representation and the nature thereof, and secondly, the nature of the Parliament itself. My second speaker then will be dealing with the political function and also international perception and all the concepts relating thereto. But before I get into any of my positive matter, I'd like to start off with a bit of rebuttal. So essentially, ladies and gentlemen, side proposition based all of their justification for the implementation of the motion or whatever the case is on three bases. First of all, the people need to talk. And secondly, that the current system of political parties is not a justified mechanism by which fair representation is achieved. And thirdly, to the direct impact of the decisions made by the Parliament. Now firstly, if we look at their justification based on the fact that people need to talk, what side opposition would say is that these channels for people to engage in politics already exist by way of, for example, obviously the voting system that we have. The voting system that we have allows for direct engagement within politics, ladies and gentlemen, and we feel that's sufficient. Also, there exist forums like, forums of public engagement, like public forums themselves, ladies and gentlemen, and we feel that these are good enough platforms for engagement, and therefore the justification that people need to talk isn't good enough. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the problems that they had with the current political system, what they said is that we can't, the political parties can't give proper representation because there's a disjoint between the people and the party. If we concede this to be true, then let them just join the political parties if they want to be represented fairly, instead of just directly joining the Parliament itself. If they want to be fairly represented by the political party, then let them join that party. And second, ladies and gentlemen, we don't believe that this disjoint actually exists. By virtue of the fact that these parties were voted for means that the people believe that the standing of said political party is representative of what they want for themselves, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore we see that this disjoint between the people and the party doesn't actually exist. And thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, looking specifically at the direct impacts of the decisions made by the Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, and how we need to let people decide what happens in Parliament because it affects the people. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't feel that this is sufficient enough analysis on side proposition by virtue of the fact that members of Parliament are also members of society, and these laws that are passed in Parliament also affect the Parliament members themselves, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore we can see that there is no double standard that exists between the Parliament members in terms of how they're affected by decisions made in Parliament, and also the members of society. And with that said, I'd like to say that side proposition at this stage doesn't even have a case. I'd like to move on then to my positive matter.
Point, sir.
I'll take it now. Here I'll be dealing specifically with the best possible representation and the nature thereof. And my aim with this argument is to prove to you how people are more accurately represented under the status quo. And I'll be dealing with this under two mechanisms. First of all, looking at democracy versus demography, and then also looking at this idea of why the lottery system itself doesn't offer proper representation. So ladies and gentlemen, let's look first of all at this idea of the democracy versus demography. We value people getting the best possible representation in Parliament. And in the status quo, what essentially happens is that members of Parliament are elected according to the voting constituency. And we value voting specifically because the actual act of voting means that you're choosing the political party that best represents you. The system of voting that exists within South Africa means that the people of South Africa are able to to vote for the political party that best represents their desires for the state. And therefore we like the idea of the government for the people, by the people, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that this is achieved through the current system of voting that exists within South Africa. And why does the lottery system specifically not equate to proper representation? First of all, ladies and gentlemen, in reality, there is no link between a person being a part of a demographic and being able to represent people as individuals, ladies and gentlemen.
Point, sir.
No, you can sit down. If, ladies and gentlemen, one of my team, take for example Sadia, were to be shoved off into Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, we're not necessarily ensuring the fact that SADIA is going to be able to stand for things like women's rights and the like, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, for that reason, we can't see that there is a link that exists intrinsically between a person being who they are and the kind of standing that they'll be able to take within Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. And for that reason, ladies and gentlemen, we don't believe that the demographic is necessarily representative of how they function within Parliament. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we need to look also at the nature of the Parliament itself. And my aim with this specific argument is to prove that the Parliament is the most successful and efficient when elected via the constructs constructed by the status quo. So what we need to remember is that Parliament has the power over how a country is run in terms of passing laws and national budgets, etc. But why Parliament is successful under the status quo is because A, the politicians involved in Parliament are best suited for that position in terms of first of all, their career. They've spent and invested their entire lives in the political game, ladies and gentlemen. And we feel that this is a good enough reason to have politicians representing us in Parliament. And secondly, ladies and gentlemen, is their very presence in Parliament means that they have political clout, ladies and gentlemen. Let's face it, it's hard to make it in the political world. But the fact that they have made it means that they are successful in this regard. And thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the skills that these people have, we believe that politicians under the status quo have a personal propensity to being good politicians, which is why they're there in the first place. And secondly, ladies and gentlemen, what we'd say is that what makes Parliament successful is the element of buy-in that is involved therein. So a government is most successful when they have buy-in from the populace, because it allows the government to affect societal change. What we'd say that buy-in comes from representation, and true representation comes from them voting for their own government because of their role in voting for them. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, why we believe a lottery-elected Parliament won't be successful, my aim with this specific argument is to prove to you how they don't have the capacity to create representative policy, and how the lottery-elected Parliament won't have the capacity to effect positive change. So first of all, if you look at the fact that you're not necessarily ensuring that the people involved in this Parliament have the sufficient skills to be able to act as proper political figures. And we're referring here to skills that can only be cultivated through a career in politics. And for example, the political experience that they get from policy making, the actual game of politics itself, to convey oneself and persuade oneself in political situations, and strategic intellect with regards to policy making. But even if they did have these skills, we still wouldn't take the action with regards to taking a lottery-elected government. Because A, we're not justified to impose decisions upon individuals with regards to what kind of career they should take, right? And even if they wanted to be in politics, then they would be. And secondly, ladies and gentlemen, for this idea of public buy-in, what we're having here is random individuals, which means that the public doesn't know them, which therefore means they don't know what their political standing on is. And therefore, they can't buy into what they stand for because they don't know what it is that they stand for. And for this reason, we propose.